Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I am honored to bring you the Enchanted Self with Dr. Barbara Becker Holstein. We will be exploring the fourth gateway to enchantment. Barbara, hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm looking forward to this exploration, which I think will probably take us even more than one time, and perhaps we can have a guest or two another time to further enrich the concept around enchantment, and in particular, the enchantment of joy and happiness and well-being, which I think most of us yearn for sure. Sometimes we capture it, and many times we don't. So today I want to get into a little bit of the sad side of missing pleasure and joy that we're entitled to, but also the wonderful, rich side of attaining some level of joy, happiness, and well-being in our lives.
And I must, as someone who has read the book several times and has done the book several times, I must say that even though it is written to empower women in their journeys through life, it is universal, and anybody can benefit by doing the 7 gateways, not just women.
Yes. I picked women because sometimes they've been shortchanged over civilization many times. Well, it's understandable. Their husbands had to go out of the cave and get the animal, or they'd all be dead. So giving women a vote or letting them help kill an animal may not have been realistic. But as centuries went on, I think that oftentimes the male species dominated when it didn't necessarily have to, and we're still struggling with all of that.
Yes.
I felt a yearning to focus on some of the on women and some of the suggestions for them at times. And of course, there are plenty of nasty women who make their husbands feel terrible. But the point is that when you're doing research and when you're trying to improve something, you can't do it all. You have to take a slice. And for me, the slice was how can women grasp certain things more easily? And the result at one point was this little book, which is the book you're talking about, which is 7 Gateways to Happiness. Yes, there it is too. Freeing your enchanted self. So very briefly, for those that are new, we've talked about the first gateway, which is getting to know yourself. And in getting to know your strengths and talents and potential, hopefully you will be able to begin to honor and love yourself in a more solid way than you may have been doing prior to understanding that you're good enough. You're here on earth for a special reason. Everyone else is taken, so get to know yourself. And then the second gateway that we talked about was get to know the generations behind you. Get to know the failings and the successes and the struggles that happen over time that even allowed you to be born. You may not like all the traits of your family of origin, or you may love all of them, but it's you. It's, not only the DNA, but some of the things you were taught, brought up to believe, etc. And it's important to acknowledge them, even if eventually some are gotten rid of. We still need to know about them. And the third gateway, we didn't do very much. We'll probably come back to that one, is tied into what do you need to get to your dreams? In other words, if you would like to be a mother at home raising your kids. Okay, well, you're going to need perhaps a man in your life, perhaps not. You're going to need some way of income. All these things have to be thought about. You may want to go for a 2-year college degree, and if you need to work, you'd be satisfied to do something like part-time librarian, or maybe work in a dental office helping or something. That's up to you. You may want to be an astronaut, and that's an entirely different route. But we can't expect to get where we need to go if we don't know what road to take. And we'll get back to that, because, you know, when we get through this sort of first version, we will get up to the sense of mentors and how critically important it is to realize that people can help us at instant moments and even change our lives with the right input. So let's just leave that aside. I want to introduce the 4th gateway of the 7 gateways, because I think this in many ways is the most interesting of all. The 4th gateway is about pleasure, knowing what you need to make you happy, and going for it. Now, one of the problems with this gateway is that people may not know what gives them pleasure and what they enjoy and what they feel they have a right to have. So why is that? Complicated. Very often, if you're in a partnership, one of the places where there's often a give and take that doesn't work that well is agreeing on what to do with time and money. The husband may think it's perfectly fine to get the season tickets to X football team, and the wife may feel it's perfectly fine, since she took ballet for 12 years, that they go into a major city and see a ballet 6 times in the winter. And you can only imagine the level of fights that can develop. The monies may be different for each one. The travel may be completely different. The babysitter arrangements necessary may be completely different. And above all, they hate each other's decision. How in the world did I marry someone who only wants to sit and fart and watch football, you know? And meanwhile, the husband is thinking, she hasn't put on a toe shoe in 10 years. She gained 50 pounds. And what the hell is this all about? I'm being a little crude today. Forgive me if it passes your own boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
With couples of any kind, some of the underlying resistances are totally raw. They're totally raw. They come from memories of parents and grandparents and others fighting and so on. They're not high level discussions that you've learned in a debate club. It's raw. So a lot of times when people can't get to their enchanted selves, it is because this rawness comes through, where nobody knows how to give and take in a reasonably soft way. So that's one of the issues that blocks realizing and doing what you really want to do. Another one is that oftentimes people forget what really gives them pleasure. For example, I'll just give you a little easy example. I worked with a young lady who came to therapy suddenly because her young mother died, and she herself had 3 little children, and you know, she's extremely busy and she needed to grieve. And we talked many times, and I asked her about bringing more pleasure into her life. And it wasn't a terrible life. Her husband was trying to be helpful. The whole thing was pretty good, but it wasn't pleasure. It wasn't that sense of, oh, time just flew. I don't even know where those 2 hours went. I just loved how I felt, what I was doing. And then one day she came in and she said to me, I remember what it was like, and I remember the exact moment that I got to my enchanted self. And she said, it was when I was walking across the college campus, and I just felt so alive, and my body was moving through space so easily, and it was a nice day, and I was going toward my class, and I felt high. I just felt enchanted. And she said, that's it, Dr. Holstein. And I said, it's a beautiful memory. And the amazing thing is, it wasn't going to the ballet in New York or a ritzy hotel overnight, or, going to Australia, which you dreamed to do for 50 years or something. It was so simple. It was simply the gathering of all the neurons and cells in your body in a way that just felt lovely. And that was that. I mean, she still was her same person, and she wasn't going to go back to the college campus and walk across it, but it helped her break through with some of the things. And she did end up taking some exercise classes and moving toward a happier spot for herself. So this sense of well-being and having a sense of specialness, things that give us pleasure and heighten ourselves, it takes work and thought, and then you can get there. For some people, it's just as simple as having mystery books from the library,
That's more true than most people realize. We seek in our entertainments vehicles to experience the things, either symbolically or in actuality, that we consider important and fulfilling and pleasant. So if you're watching a particular genre type of movie over and over and over again, or a particular type of TV show, asking yourself often, why, out of all the possible things I can watch, am I continuously drawn back to here? And that's a really excellent way of finding your enchanted self.
Have you done that? Do you have
Oh, yes. When I was a kid, I read barbarian books, one after the other, and comic books and about barbarians, and read about historical barbarians. And in addition to the mythology, which was part of my culture, I found an imaginary myth and discovered that people can make up their own myths. And since I was drawn to the barbarian, that became one of the vehicles of exploration. And I lived these things rather than just reading about them. And by doing that for maybe 10, 15 years, I was able to reach parts of myself that I wasn't even aware were there in the process of doing my barbarian show and doing my barbarian things, which is how we met.
right?
And then from there, it's now that I was no longer fighting my cultural upbringing, I went back to what myths inspired it from the beginning, and I started living those, and that became my enchanted self. And it's going to be the one I go to the grave with. I legally changed my name, and I felt fulfilled in the other lives that I had experimented with. And now it's like this one. This was the first one. This was the strongest one. This persisted throughout life. So let me find a way of honoring this and exploring it and getting out of it what I can.
So let me tell you what I think my enchanted self, how it got birth. When I was a little girl, kind of lonely as an only child, I became a great reader, not of heavy stuff. I mean, really funny books. I love the comic books of my generation. I love the classics that were out for kids, Little Women, Little Men, Silver Skates, all these things. And I love the mystery stories, Nancy Drew, and then there was a series about nurses that had some mystery in them. I forgot what that was called, and the Bobbsey twins, and just what was there. I ate it up, and I used those books as my secret cave, really, a way to forget my homework, to forget I was alone, and to just merge with these characters. So when I grew up and I got my degree, passed my license to be a psychologist for lots of reasons that I can't, I'll just weaken it if I try to go everywhere. I got into the treatment room and I had a full practice very fast. And I recognized that I was frustrated. There was something in my heart missing and something in the way treatment was going. Not that any clients didn't get relatively better, state of the art for 30 years ago, whatever. I did all the right things. But I began to realize I never really knew much about them except their problems and, working on solving them and so on. So I was with my parents, and my father was a great, great visionary. I don't know if that term was ever used for him, but he was. And we're talking, and I'm saying I'm sort of discouraged. I want to do something, and he suggested, and also I have to give my husband credit. There was a moment when my husband helped pull this together. Also, what they suggested was basically, why don't you do some research on women? Obviously that's your topic. Somehow get to know more women. You can't use your clients because they're paying for confidential treatment of what's on their mind, not you deciding to do research. But go to other women. And my father suggested have a series of questions. Case study, have like 8 or 9 questions that every woman will get the same questions. And you'll take notes or use a machine and record it, and then begin to see what you're seeing. And my husband suggested, well, call women in the community, meet for lunch, do something. And it was very interesting because it really does prove that people you love, people close to you, can often come up with the simplest, best suggestions of all. You never know. So I ended up interviewing some local women at lunch, and I did use a little recorder of the day. And then eventually I made sure I had women that were 50 and 60 and 70. And I think my oldest woman was about 82. And what I discovered when I started to look over all these answers to questions like, what did you realize growing up? Were there secret messages in your family? Everyone had secret messages. They said, oh, of course, of course. My brother Charlie got to college and I knew I wasn't supposed to talk about college. I knew that I had to marry by 20 because my mother kept saying I have looks that'll fail. The truth was unbelievable and fascinating. And when I asked about, do you have something that's special to you that you would consider uplifting, getting you to a happy place kind of thing? This was very hard. I would have to reframe it sometimes 5 or 6 times. Yes, I do mean like joy, or I do mean something where your heart is beating a little faster and you're excited and you can't, I'd have to find the code words for the particular woman. And then everybody had something, even if it was just some plants that they were watering in their front lawn, something that was special to them, usually that they didn't want to talk about. Why? Because there was some vague or less than vague memory that when they talked about it, someone shot it down or laughed or teased. Oftentimes these private places are private because to get the best out of them, you don't want someone saying, well, you could have gone to the other library and then you would have 4 weeks out. just some nonsense that somehow ripped into the inner vein of what this stuff was. And so I went down to the beach one day and still realized, the hole was in my heart too. And then this expression, enchanted self, started to float in my head. That's what I was going to call it for the rest of my life. So that's my story.
That is an awesome story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. So, and of course, once I had my own story, I think I was better equipped. And when I went back to my clients, I don't really tell them this part of my life, but I would start to make sure in the first session that at least I said something like, so tell me one of the best times you've had, even if it's 9 years old when you went to day camp, or it's yesterday when you were the one that got a free bag of groceries when you went shopping. Everybody came up with something.
Mhm.
And then I could pop in this concept on and off as I worked with the person. And I did find that my own mental health radically improved. Oh, and going back to you and your decisions, then I began to realize that my destiny really involves not only helping people, but the written word, the word, now that there's so much else besides just writing, talking to people like we're doing today, that I must carry on and keep coming forward with approaches around the enchanted self, even if they have totally different names. I know in essence that that's what I'm trying to do, is to bring a healthier, positive side to people's life and interpretation of life. And so I imagine myself now that I'm a senior, lots of times I'll imagine myself sitting somewhere still writing or dictating. And I like to see these sorts of images as, rather than playing pickleball or something. I'm not saying I don't want to have fun, but, seeing these images stabilizing as me for the rest of my life. And I think that's what you were saying too.
Yes, it lends a context to life. It lends meaning that might not otherwise be there. And part of my mission, and I used to verbalize it in New York when I was in the human services field, and especially with vocational rehabilitation. It's like, look, I'm wandering around New York with a fur and leather and a sword, and I've just become part of the scenery. And I can be exactly who I am and still lead a professional life, because I was very much sought after in vocational rehabilitation and workforce development. And after a while, initially, I guess it was because I was good at what I did. People tolerated eccentricity that I might possess. But then later on, it became they wanted the eccentricity. And if I showed up in a more conventional form of dress, and by conventional for me, it's always been t-shirts and like cargo pants. People were disappointed that I didn't have a sword strapped to my back, or I wasn't wearing my arm bracers, or whatever. And to me, it's not a costume. It's just basically part of how I creatively express myself. And I think my task was to show that you could be who you are, even on an archetypal or a mythic level, and still contribute to society. So there are alternatives to the social script, which is often very disempowering, and ways of living in the world. And now lately, I've been getting involved more with my community. I guess you can call it being political. And I'm finding that the same truths are there. People don't know about my past in vocational rehabilitation. People don't know about my past in workforce development or in mental health field or any of the things that I've done. And they just know me as Hercules, Invictus, and the things I'm doing now, which are very mythical. And yet I'm finding myself in spheres that I was in when I was more quote unquote professional in the way that I did things. and something came across to open those doors. And I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday. So we can be who we are and live a fulfilling life. We can be who we are and find ways to support ourselves. It'll take time and a lot of creativity if you're not going to follow the normal social
Right.
script. But there are options. And if you're no longer following the social script, life becomes an adventure, becomes a journey, and you can make mistakes and learn from the mistakes. And, it becomes an adventure, a myth.
So you're inspiring me, because not only have I known you since you were in costume, and very quickly I found that you are not insane. You are really a special friend, and it's always held. You're normal, you're in touch with the world in a solid way, and yet you had this design of showing others that you can get closer to being a full self.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me, it's again, I'll tell my story for a few minutes, which is different, but many things are the same. So that little girl who read all the Nancy Drew books and everything also kept a diary since I was 9, a Girl Scout diary. And almost every day sounded the same in the diary, because one thing I was not able to do, and I think it's partly the way the mind develops, is even the first 3 years when I kept the diary, I could not tell anything that was bad or confusing or might suggest my parents were fighting. I only used it to basically report my day. I wore my new brown shoes today. Alice came over after school and her mother came and got her. And I think that was perfectly all right, because the child's mind between like 9 and 12 has to stay very centered and stabilized, and everything's okay, And later on in my high school days with my diaries, they were a little more open. I might say, I'm angry at Johnny. I don't like what he did to me. Maybe we'll break up, but there'd be nothing really behind it, still it was where kids are. But now, as I found my enchanted self and I'm doing all this work, I started to write a diary that was not me. It was a young girl without a name. And I think you've read some of those writings. And I developed this girl. She is a young teenager in these diaries, and she goes through many changes and growth that is perfectly normal. But she has some problems. Her mother is not particularly communicative. Her mother and father, as a couple, fight behind closed doors. She has a nuisance younger brother, and then on top of it, her parents announce that her mother's pregnant with a baby, so she has to deal with that. She wants a dog. She doesn't get a dog for a long, long time. And, there's many ins and outs. She has a crush that drives her crazy because, of course, the young boy of 12-ish, 13, he doesn't even understand she has a crush, so it's one of these lose-lose situations, except that she gets to admire him from sitting at the desk behind him in school and chatting with her mother and begging her mother to drive by the street where he lives. And one day he's out washing the car with his dad and he sees them. She wants to kill herself because now he knows that she's tracking him, so it's complicated. And of course, life is complicated. So these 2 books, The Truth and Secrets, are available. I just want to show you one of them. This is The Truth. This is the first book when she's younger. And they give me a chance to have the voice of kids really come through in a way parents, grandparents, and others, counselors, therapists, can help kids coming of age because it's a crazy time. But I'm not trying to overdo talking about this. I wanted to finish the theme of my own story. And what eventually happened is the right people came into place. I mentioned this once maybe, but I'll mention it again. A man offered to help me turn what I was writing in the books into a play. The play got written, the play got produced, people loved it locally, it did really well. And then my film career started. Now, if anyone who knew me growing up had ever imagined that I would be a filmmaker, they would have laughed. You know, I was the kid that if I took a picture with a brownie camera, believe me, it was so ordinary, you couldn't even think about it. I mean, it wasn't like I had an eye for focusing or, you know, some of these kids in our generations, they were talented, so you expected them to maybe end up in one of these things. No, for me, it was a very circuitous route that ended up there because I needed even more gateways and ways to help people understand the difficulties of growing up, what coming of age all through life, and we come of age again and again and again, how hard it is, but how good it can be if we understand and work with it. And so I had to get somewhere by this very crooked path. And the path developed just like it did for you. It's amazing.
And you've inspired countless other people, including me. Like you inspired me to write. I'd always written since I was a young kid, and some of my things are published in like local papers or school magazines and things like that. But you encouraged me to write, and at last count, I've been published in over 20 paranormal anthologies, and
Oh, wow.
books, and so I've become very prolific in
Yes.
and now I'm wrestling with getting a book together to express the things that none of the vehicles I've tried in life have allowed me to express. So that's my current adventure.
That's good. That's good. So we're actually going to leave this particular show today, sort of like intermission. You know,
Okay.
like, telling our audience, imagine you're in this beautiful building that, yeah, my husband's trying to signal me. I know. You're in a beautiful building where you've watched this wonderful show, and now the red velvet curtain is slowly coming down, and you're going to go out in the lobby and have a glass of wine and a snack. And we'll be back because I think this particular subject could go on for a few shows and would be very interesting if we could get a couple of guests also to talk about their journeys.
I agree. Thank you so very much for sharing so much of yourself and your creativity in your life. And I look forward to the next installment of Gateways to Enchantment.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. Take care, Barbara. And thank you to all who are watching this on YouTube. It is now a day later after midnight, and you're watching it. Take care, everybody, and thank you.